Alcaraz did this earlier this year too. And now, what is he sitting out again? Play well a bit, then get injured. Mismanage the injury and store out. So many such players.
Chung Hayan here did the same years ago.
Made the Australian Open semis, then fell off.
That's what happened?
I'm a little worried Alcaraz is heading down that same path. In Alcaraz's case, he's a player at the top, and the coaches and people around him must be very skilled people. So they surely give him the best training and care. I'm sure they handle all of that well. But for those of you watching this video,
You're out there hitting hard, but
your wrist hurts, your knee hurts, so you can't play right. Plenty of you, I'm sure. If you are as good as Alcaraz and still hurting, at least it feels less unfair. But plenty of you play badly and are just in pain too. How can I help people like that? That's what I'm making this video to talk about. You play hard, but your wrist hurts. I've packed in info to help those of you. So watch to the end and it will help. As for the wrist problem Alcaraz has, looking through various sources, it's simply wrist tenosynovitis. That's all they've made public. Now, what exactly is tenosynovitis? So many tendons pass through the wrist. What's a tendon? First, you have muscle. Muscle attaches to bone. Muscle connects one bone to another. In the middle, the muscle is the red part. We eat meat, right? When you eat meat, that red thick part is basically the muscle. When you eat ribs, there's that long tough part on the bone, right? That part is what we call the tendon. But in the case of the wrist, the hand has many bones. The wrist has very smooth movement and moves through many ranges. The muscle doesn't pass through in its thick form. It changes into a thin tendon form and passes through. And not just one or two, a very large number of muscles, or have to pass through that narrow space in tendon form. If you look at your finger here, when it moves like this, to the left and the right, and when bent, it needs to stretch too, and spread out, it shortens, you'll be able to see it moving like this. Even when you move just one finger, all of these move along with it. But here's the problem. As these muscles pass through, which tendon in particular takes the most strain? That's the problem. So where do you need to look? This is what we call tenosynovitis, and that means inflammation forms in the thin membrane around the tendon. That's what it refers to. But a specialist who reads the body checks the more detailed parts and has to look at those parts. Which tendon is inflamed? And which movement especially brings the most pain. You have to check these well. Those two are jobs for the clinic and jobs for rehabilitation or physical training. Those are two different areas. If your wrist hurts and you're watching, you took anti-inflammatories from the clinic. You've rested and probably bought a brace too. If someone who hasn't done any of that comes to me, I prefer possible first to go to the clinic and get various treatment, and then come see me once you've gotten a bit better. When you've overdone it and the inflammation is flared up, you have to rest first.
and no need to overdo it yet.
But if you've rested enough and taken measures, but it still hurts, there's one more thing left. When I talk about the hand and when I study it, there's one category I always think of. It's called musician therapy. Things like guitar, violin, piano, right? It's a field that specializes in caring for musicians. Piano players, string players, they use their fingers so delicately and for a very long time, right? So tenosynovitis in the fingers and wrist is really common among them. So in this field, they look at where in the wrist gets overloaded, where in the finger is strained. They look at all this in great detail.
And I think this concept is really important for a sport like tennis too.
Think about it, it makes sense. Tell these musicians, don't use your hands, rest. Saying just that is basically a death sentence for them, right? So they narrow it down further, no matter what. They keep rest and recovery to a minimum while doing every measure they can.
Since they can't just rest forever,
With the matching corrective exercise, through these, they help them get back as fast as possible. Exactly. Which finger was taking the load? Whether this finger was moving properly? Which of the tendons crossing the wrist was overloaded? They sort through them one by one with various tests, giving each finger resistance. Which movement brings out that pain the most? They go through and check all that.
and then it comes out.
It hurts you when you use the finger this way. It hurts most when the wrist works this way. And sometimes that spot needs the muscle selectively released.
And other times, selective strengthening.
Doing it that way versus just vaguely resting, pinpointing that one spot causing the problem and dealing with it. Those two give very different results.
It's the same in tennis.
Because your wrist hurts, just saying don't use your wrist. Hearing that is basically saying the same as saying quit tennis and rest, right? Of course, as I said earlier, sometimes you do need a temporary rest, but in the end you approach the problem in fine detail. And doing the exercises related to it well is the key point. If you look at musicians, some of them do 10 or 12 hours in a day. They practice that much, even if it's not high intensity work. Whether your wrist and fingers can hold up under long use, that's the key point. But tennis is a different story. You don't use them as long as a musician does, but the intensity on your hand and wrist is huge. Just think about it. A ball that regularly comes at you faster than 100 km/h. The moment it slams into the racket face, that impact travels down the handle straight into your hand, and your fingers and wrist grip it and hold up against it. So in tennis, treatment methods for recovery matter a lot, but you can't leave out the strengthening side. Letting the inflammation calm down is one of the process you have to go through. But go straight back on court and you're in the same body as before you got hurt. You hurt because a part of the body was too weak to handle it. What happens with the same body? The same result happens again. So, strength that can handle that, force. You have to build that as you go. So, where to look and how? That's the important point here. This is where Alcaraz's unusual swing path gives us a hint. Watch Alcaraz's swing and one feature stands out. He has a lot of paths that pull up hard from low to high. It's a style that makes heavy topspin when you pull the racket up hard from below. So, the racket won't turn in your hand. You basically need the grip to hold it. What works here first is the fingers under the racket. From the index finger to the pinky finger, the tendons that bend these four fingers are holding onto the racket, and it's not just about holding. When you try to pull the lower one up, it takes a lot of force.
And the tendons running to these fingers are unusual.
The part where they actually start is up near the elbow.
From there, they pass the wrist and the palm, and they stretch all the way out to the knuckles. So one motion of gripping your fingers tight, the elbow and the wrist both get involved in it. So if this area feels uncomfortable or feels weak, you often end up with elbow problems too.
Here's why this matters.
It's because the load can't all pile onto one single joint. The elbow, the wrist, and each finger knuckle. This force has to be shared out evenly across them. And if any one spot can't do its share, somewhere else has to take on that share for it, right? The spot the force piles onto is where pain ends up. And one more, the tendons that run toward the thumb. Abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis. And the names are a little tricky, I know. Just to think of them as muscles that spread and extend the thumb. What these tendons share is this. Near the wrist, by the thumb, their direction bends sharply once. At the spot where they bend, between the tendon and the tunnel around it, friction is bound to go up. So this is a spot where problems tend to crop up, especially often. When the tunnel this thumb side tendons run through goes bad, we call it the Quervain's Tenosynovitis. And another key one toward the thumb. There's the flexor carpi radialis, which starts up in the forearm. As I mentioned earlier, in Alcaraz's case, his signature is that upward swing, going low to high. It doesn't just go straight up, as the motion comes through from back to front, sending it forward and upward at once. That's the job of the muscle called the flexor carpi radialis. And it's built so that tendon takes a lot of strain. This too is just a very simplified version. So don't just chalk it up to wrist tenosynovitis and stop there. For someone like me, why a problem like this came up? I check things like that in great detail to identify the problem and helping you solve it. Alcaraz probably has physical coaches right by his side, and they check in even more detail than what I just described. So Alcaraz can return as fast and safely as possible. I'm sure they're giving it everything. So we looked at the basic principle behind it.
So for those with wrist pain,
I want to show you some methods you can follow along. First, why and how wrist trouble develops. Let's take a look at one of the causes. Pull your thumb in towards the inside of your palm. With it there, close the other fingers into a fist.
Then slowly bend your wrist toward the pinky finger.
If a sharp, tingling pain shoots up in the wrist just below your thumb, that's the sign. Then the passage, the thumb tendon runs through.
You can suspect a problem in that area.
It's what we call the Quervain's tenosynovitis.
If this movement feels stiff and awkward,
Your upward swing path won't come out well. The racket head won't drop at all. So you keep dumping it into the net, right? This works as a test, of course, but it's worth actively doing this muscle lengthening stretch too. If a stiff wrist that wouldn't drop loosens up, that clears the net high, then drops right on the line. You'll make that kind of topspin well. Part of it it is simply that you're too stiff. But if the muscles here get stronger, you will produce much stronger shots and much stronger spin too. More than just practicing your swing.
You'll see much faster results this way.
You've played thumb wrestling at least once, right?
You win by pinning your opponent's thumb down that game. Here, like when you have to defend, raise your thumb as high as possible into a thumbs up. You feel like, wow, this is harder than I thought. Instead of moving just your thumb, lift the whole wrist up so that the thumb side comes closer to your forearm. You're creating the motion we call radial deviation. Then those muscles I mentioned, the ones holding your wrist, get stronger. And not just flexible, you'll be able to load real power into it too. Of course, if your wrist isn't in great shape, just moving the wrist is fine. Without moving your wrist too much, just moving the thumb a little is enough. Just 20 reps 3 times a day like this, and your wrist gets a lot stronger. So today, using Alcaraz's case, we looked at what wrist tenosynovitis is, why it happens, and how you should fix it. We took a look at those problems. Overworking them all day on a keyboard and mouse, ton straining that weakened wrist on court. For club players, this kind of frustrating situation is really common. In this video, on the wrist side of all that, I packed in things that could help you. Like I said, ultimately, you have to use your body well for your tennis to grow. That's something I always tell you. Pinpointing exactly what's wrong in your body and how to build it. In tennis's many situational skills.
How you should use your body in each moment.
That correct way of using it, that's what I teach you. So, skills for many tennis situations. When you learn them and play. Ways to loosen up the body that just wouldn't move. I teach that. So, if you like even more detailed care, it'd be good to check the pinned comment below the video. So you all stay injury-free and get to enjoy tennis in good health. I'll keep bringing you useful info. Thank you for watching.